On a blistering June afternoon, 200 elite cavalrymen realized they had ridden directly into a lethal, inescapable slaughterhouse. Panic surged as thousands of Lakota warriors rose from the tall grass, outflanking the soldiers with terrifying synchronized precision. In less than 60 minutes, the pride of the U.S. Army was completely erased from the face of the earth. We will uncover the psychological trap and the specific intelligence failure that guaranteed this catastrophic military annihilation. You are about to discover how a single spiritual prophecy tactically outmaneuvered the most aggressive general in American history. Stick around to see the fatal geometry of the battlefield that doomed these men before the first shot was fired. The 7th Cavalry was the nuclear option of the frontier, a highly disciplined machine built for total destruction. Custer, the boy general, was obsessed with his own legend and desperate for a decisive, career-defining victory. But he committed the cardinal sin of warfare. He divided his significantly smaller force in the face of superior numbers. Intelligence reports warned of a massive gathering, but Custer arrogantly dismissed the data as exaggerated native propaganda. The Little Bighorn wasn't just a campsite, it was the largest gathering of indigenous military power in history. Over 2,000 warriors were waiting, fueled by a desperate need to protect their families from existential extermination. Weeks earlier, Sitting Bull had a terrifying vision of soldiers falling into camp upside down like dead grasshoppers. This prophecy wasn't just magic, it was psychological armor unifying the tribes with an absolute certainty of victory. Custer split his regiment into 3 weak columns, unable to support each other across the broken, rugged terrain. Major Reno attacked the south end, expecting the village to flee in panic at the sight of blue uniforms. Instead, he hit a solid wall of resistance as hundreds of warriors swarmed out of the dust to fight. Reno's nerve collapsed instantly. He ordered a disorganized retreat that turned into a frantic, bloody rout to the bluffs. This tactical failure freed the entire mass of Lakota warriors to turn their full lethal attention toward Custer. Custer was now isolated on a ridge miles away, completely blind to the fact that he was the new target. He believed he was attacking the rear of a fleeing village, unaware he was the prey in a trap. The terrain was a nightmare of ravines and coulees, allowing the warriors to approach the cavalry almost completely unseen. Crazy Horse, a tactical genius, led a flanking maneuver that cut off Custer's only avenue of potential retreat. The warriors didn't charge blindly. They used the terrain to engineer a killing zone of crossfire and confusion. Custer's men were dismounted, fighting in skirmish lines that were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of incoming fire. The soldiers' single-shot carbines jammed as they overheated, while the warriors poured in fire with superior repeating Winchester rifles. Panic set in as the defensive perimeter collapsed, shrinking rapidly into a tiny, desperate knot of doomed men. This was asymmetric warfare at its finest, where mobility and morale completely negated the structural discipline of the army. The last stand wasn't a heroic long battle. Forensic evidence suggests it was a sudden, chaotic, and brutal disintegration. Custer died with a bullet to the temple and chest stripped of his command and his life in minutes. The Grasshopper Prophecy had come true, and the soldiers lay dead on the hillside, stripped and mutilated by the victors. But the nightmare wasn't over. The warriors turned back to finish off the survivors trapped on the distant bluffs. Reno-Benteen dug in on a hilltop, desperately piling saddles and dead horses to block the incoming bullets. Thirst drove men to madness, with volunteers risking suicide runs to the river just to fill a single canteen. Benteen, the stubborn captain, walked the firing line upright, shaming his terrified men into holding their precarious positions. His leadership was the only thing standing between the remaining companies and the same total annihilation Custer had suffered. The siege lasted for 2 days, a grueling test of endurance against a relentless and numerically superior enemy force. Suddenly, the massive village packed up and vanished, melting into the landscape like smoke before the approaching reinforcements arrived. The arrival of General Terry revealed the gruesome truth, a field of white bodies scattered like debris across the ridge. The defeat sent a shockwave through America, ruining the centennial celebration and demanding an immediate, furious military response. The press turned Custer into a martyr, ignoring his reckless decisions to fuel a narrative of savage betrayal. In reality, Custer was the architect of his own demise, blinded by ambition and a fatal underestimation of his enemy. He failed to understand that a warrior fighting for his family is infinitely more dangerous than a soldier fighting for pay. The victory at Little Bighorn was the zenith of Plains Indian power, but it also sealed their ultimate fate. The U.S. government responded with total war, hunting down the bands until they were forced onto the reservations forever. Sitting Bull's vision saved his people that day, but it could not stop the relentless tide of westward expansion. Tactical brilliance won the battle, but the industrial and logistical might of the United States won the wider war. We must analyze the fog of war that separated the columns, preventing any coordination when it mattered the most. Without radios, Custer had no way of knowing that Reno had already been defeated before his own attack began. The message carried by the courier to Benteen, "Come on, big village, be quick," arrived far too late to help. This delay highlights the fragility of 19th century command and control when faced with a highly mobile, fluid enemy force. The archetype of the noble savage was shattered for the American public, replaced by a terrified demand for security. Historians argue that even with Gatling guns, the terrain would have prevented Custer from deploying them effectively in time. The defeat was a failure of strategic intelligence, relying on outdated assumptions about how the tribes would react to pressure. Custer expected them to run, but he cornered them, leaving them no choice but to fight to the death. This is a classic military blunder. Never force your enemy into a position where their only option is lethal violence. The psychological impact of the scalping and mutilation terrified soldiers, affecting their morale in subsequent campaigns against the tribes. Crazy Horse remains a phantom of history, a tactical genius who never allowed his photograph to be taken by whites. His leadership on that ridge demonstrated that indigenous warfare was sophisticated, adaptive, and capable of defeating a modern army. The Custer myth persisted for a century, hiding the tactical incompetence behind a veil of romanticized heroic last stand imagery. Modern archaeology has mapped the bullet casings, proving the collapse was a panicked rout, not a disciplined defensive stand. The story is a grim reminder that arrogance in leadership is often paid for in the blood of the subordinate. Today, markers stand on the battlefield where enemies once killed each other, a silent testament to the cost of conflict. The battle reminds us that true courage is found not in conquest, but in the desperate defense of one's home. Little Bighorn stands as an eternal warning. Underestimating the resolve of a free people is a fatal strategic error.